Good day, Soksai 30 students. This presentation is about the Filipino notion of justice. The essential question for this article that I have given you in your VLE is the following. Is there a Filipino notion of justice? Jokno in this article is coming from a position wherein he wants to find a notion of justice that is native to us Filipinos despite our colonization. So far in this course, we have also discussed Western, very Western notions of justice. And now it is time to look for the Filipino notion of justice. And in the next week, we are also looking at indigenous notions of justice for your activity. So there are other questions that we seek to answer through this presentation, which is number one, is there a notion of justice native to us Filipinos? And two, what do our languages tell us about our notion of justice? Languages, I say languages because it's not just Filipino, it's not just the national language, but the languages that our ethno-linguistic groups speak in the Philippines. So for this presentation, I also want you to look at your own language, your own culture from your province, from your family, and think about the notion of justice that you have that are from that you can trace, kumbaga, in your family or ethno-linguistic group. So in Filipino, we refer to justice as justicia. But according to Diokno, this idea of justicia is still very Western because, um, first of all, the etymology, the word, comes from the Spanish word justicia, which is also, which is from our previous colonizer. So therefore, we need to look at a word that is rooted in our very own languages. So we do not just do this for for justice, but for other concepts as well. Okay, like for example, we refer to cultura, to culture as cultura, which is again a Filipinized version of uh, an English word or a Spanish word, cultura or culture. But we have a word for it. We have a Filipino word for it, which is kalinangan. Okay, so it's also the same for example, community. It's not komunidad, but pamayanan. Okay, from the root word bayan. So for the Filipino notion of justice, it is katarungan. Okay, so Diokno discusses the root word of this word, which is tarong in Cebuano, which means straight, not curved, not tilting, proper, or right. So this is our idea of justice, katarungan. This is also our word for justice. So there are many words that can be made from the root word tarong, which is yung pangatarungan, to explain or to defend, which is, that's also Filipino. This also makes sense in Filipino, I mean. And then, makatarunganon, reasonable, matarong or righteous. And for our notion of justice, for the Filipino notion of justice, katarungan means both justice and right. So right here is not karapatan, meaning our rights, human rights, but right in in terms of being proper, being appropriate, being straight, okay? In terms of in terms of justice, okay? So he found this word and says that this represents our notion of justice. So at this point, I want you to think of the words that you use in your language that has the same meaning of justice. Is it close to the idea of katarungan? Is it also katarungan, which is, according to Jokno, is also used in Tagalog, Ilonggo, Pampango, and Cebuano. So, tarong in this case is rectitude, or what is morally right or correct, or what is appropriate for individuals, or what is appropriate in a societal context. So, first of all, according to him, that is our notion of justice as Filipinos. There are also related words to katarungan in other languages, which is lintag in Ilocano, lintag in Ilocano, or which means the same thing. Not crooked, direct, upright, honest, just, righteous, impartial, or fair. Kalintagan, which is justice. In Tagalog, it is tuwid. No? So, straight. Katuwiran is, the the characteristic of being straight or being upright. Katuwiran, meaning reason, and mga tuwiran means to justify oneself. So these are very much related words. Okay? But what we see here is, yun nga, they're related to the original word or the word that we're looking at, katarungan. And what we see here, however, is that they have similar meanings but not necessarily the same. Like, for example, if we say that katarungan is the same as katwiran, are we saying that justice is related to reason or related to reasoning, meaning the action of justifying or reasoning? Okay? But Jokno says that katwiran is not the same as katarungan. It has the same meaning, rectitude, meaning uprightness. But katwiran in itself is not justice. Because when we say mga twiran, pag nangangatwiran ka, or kapag ikaw ay merong katwiran, remember, I always remember this in the context of family, for example, of parents. When you're a child and your parents doesn't want you to talk back, nangangatwiran ka. You are justifying yourself, but this word has also negative connotations, meaning maaaring kapag nangangatwiran ka ay hindi ito yung totoo. Okay, so tinatanong ka kung ginawa mo ba tong bagay na to. Nangangatwiran ka, you're justifying why you did this thing. For example, if it's a bad thing, why did you not go home last night? So nangangatwiran ka, kasi po gabi na, tapos, for example, kailangan kong tulungan yung kaibigan ko na ganito, ganyan. Maaring totoo siya, maaari ding hindi. So, ang sabi ni Diokno ay, ito ay hindi ibig sabihin na makatwiran, reasonable, something reasonable, is not necessarily just. Okay? And any justification cannot be automatically just. Okay? So, meaning, katwiran in Tagalog, in Filipino, is not the same as katarungan. Okay? So, his example here is, like, for example, martial law. The legal justifications of martial law may be right. You can justify it. Maari mo itong maging katwiran o maari kang mga tuwiran na ito ay tama dahil ginawa nga nitong maging mas peaceful daw ang bansa, mas naging mayaman daw ang bansa, ganyan, tapos magbigay ka ng iyong mga facts or mga evidence. Pero, kung titingnan mo ito ng mas sa kabuuan nito, maaring makita mo na yung katwiran or the justification of martial law does not make it just. Okay? So, maalala ninyo yung distinction natin between categorical and consequential justice. Maaring yung pangangatwiran ay nangangatwiran ka para mahanap mo yung justification or yung pagiging makatarungan noong resulta nung nagawa. Kasi for example, martial law, may mga mabuti daw itong nagawa. Okay? Doon ka lang nagfo-focus. Pero when you look at it when you look at the big picture, how many people died, how many people were denied their freedoms, maaaring masabi mo o masasabi natin na categorically it's not something that is just. Lalo na when we say in Filipino na ang pagiging makatarungan ay pagiging matuwid, kumbaga, o pagiging appropriate, pagiging right. Right, not in the terms of tama ka, pero appropriate sa situation na yun. It is not the right thing to do. Hindi ito makatarungan. So, may mga related pa na words sa justice or sa katarungan in the Filipino language. So, of course, we have the tarong or the katarungan, which is what is right, equity, fairness, karapatan, what is karapatan, coming from the root word dapat, ano yung dapat, which is, according to Diokno, shows the intimate relationship of rights and justice. Okay? So, what is right, meaning what is morally right or rectitude, kumbaga, in a society, in the Filipino society, gives us certain rights or certain karapatan, mga karapatan. At yung mga karapatan na ito ay hindi dapat, dapat ito ay aligned pa rin sa katarungan. Okay? Another is justice. In the beginning of this course, I have asked you what you thought about justice, and many of you noted that you thought that justice was about the law, okay, the law being followed, okay. But according to Diokno, justice, in the Philippines at least, is separate from the law. Yung word natin for law is different from justice. Okay? Wala siyang connection, kumbaga. At masasabi natin dito na hindi dahil wala siyang connection, but dahil magkaiba yung idea natin kung ano yung batas at kung ano yung katarungan, masasabi natin na not every law is just. Okay? It's separate from the law. The implementation and the execution of the law is separate from it being just. Meaning, even if you have a law, doesn't mean that it's automatically just. Okay? So, ayun, that's another distinction that Jokno was making. Another is the word kapangyarihan, power. And again, some of you in the beginning of the class also noted how justice is related to how it is, yun nga, related to law, and how law is powerful, and therefore justice can be related to how power is used. Okay, so this is very much right. But in the Philippines, it is noted by Jokno that we do not have a word for, we do not have the word that is as intense as the idea of power, wherein you have power and you make people follow. Okay, like, yeah. So our word is kapangyarihan, which is a word that is rooted in or related to, for example, pag sinabi mong may kapangyarihan ka, you have the ability to make something happen, 'di ba? Or something, you have the power to have something done. Okay? Nakapangyayari, hindi ba? Kapangyarihan. But it's different from lakas, which is strength, 'di ba? Strength. And we do not have a word that perfectly encapsulates power. When we define kasi power or naked power, it's both. It's the way that a person can make a person do something. If you're person A, you can do person B do something. And there's an element of coercion, especially if it's in the context of the government. Wala tayong word na nagsasama noong dalawa na yun. So therefore, if we relate it to justice, our notion of justice really does not highlight the power of a person, the power of a position. Okay? Maybe we can see this in religion, the power of God. Diba? But when we look at justice in the context of our lives as Filipinos, it's something that is inconsistent, kumbaga. Because we know that power, kapangyarihan, na hindi laging matuwid, hindi laging upright, hindi laging equitable, hindi laging fair. Okay? So, if power or kapangyarihan is used by people in the government, it is not necessarily just. It should be accepted by the constituents. Not because you are in a position, it is not automatic that you do just deeds. Okay? Because in the idea of katarungan, we will see later, one core concept there is fairness. You need to be fair. Lastly is what we have mentioned a while ago, katwiran, reason, argument, self-justification. Again, just to reiterate, even though there are relationships with the words na katarungan, katwiran, not every justification, not every katwiran is just or makatarungan. So we can substantiate Diokno's article with this article by Mercado 1979 in his work elements of Filipino ethics. He notes like how Filipino culture is more communitarian than individualistic. So in the Philippines, justice is not uh, based on equality due to a stratified society. Like in the very beginning, we have in the pre-colonial times, we have um, kind of positions in the society. So this is not necessarily unequal, okay? But if you look back, maybe in your history one, they will say that your history books would say that these positions in the society, like for example, pagiging babaylan, pagiging bayani, ganyan. So in the 1970s, wala pa masyadong ganito. So maybe uh, Mercado was looking at this. Pero ang gusto ko kasing kunin dun sa kanyang work on the Sakop model was the idea of a communitarian justice. Okay? But it also follows, like for example, kung sa isang bayan, sa sinaunang bayan, ay nandoon ka sa position mo, which is for example, babaylan, bayani ka, or datu ka, or yun nga, you're one of the common people. You have rights, okay? You are endowed with rights proper to that station. And meaning, it's not necessarily correct to say that everyone has similar or equal rights. Okay? So, there's also the idea of maratabat or the combination of pride, honor, shame in the pre-colonial society, which we will be tackling in a bit later, in a bit. Okay, so in this setting, in the Sakop model, the Sakop here is the society. So, you're part of a Sakop or part of a society. That justice is not individualistic, meaning you have a position in the society, you have um, tasks, you're very crucial for the functioning of a society. Your responsibility or duty is thus inseparable from your rights. Okay? So you have laws, they have laws there to rule or to govern that society. And Mercado notes how this is very much related to one's tasks in the society. Okay, meaning you are not just an individual, you are a part of a society. So, if you progress as an individual, if you are part of that society, you do your work and function well, then the society will grow as well. So this Sakop model, as you can see, is like similar to the uh, myth of metals, but it's not as stringent or it's not as discriminatory because we see or we know that in the pre-colonial Filipino society or yung sinasabi nating sinaunang bayan, ay ganun nga, may responsibilidad, meron ka ring mga karapatan, at para ito sa ikabubuti ng buong bayan. So again, what I wanted to look at in the Sakop model in the pre-colonial Philippines is the interaction of the individual to its society that I think is also very much related to how we view such things in the present. Like for example, for the Sakop model, self-dignity is interior. We have a kalooban, we have a self, okay? And this kalooban is very much related to the society that we do not want to stand out. Okay? Like, saan natin to makikita? For example, the ideas of hiya, ulaw, or bayin, wherein we are expected to follow norms in the society, and when we do not follow, we lose face. Okay, we lose face. Because, sabi nga dyan, di ba, we have a kalooban. Siyempre, kung may kalooban, meron ding labas. Yung labas na yan ay yung ating sarili na ipinapakita sa ibang tao. So, kung yung kalooban natin hindi consistent doon sa labas, okay, yan, dahil nga hindi siya consistent, ayan, maaari nitong ma-disrupt yung mga norms doon sa society. No? So, for example, kung wala kang hiya, ganyan, ayun yung magiging tingin sa'yo ng mga tao. So, therefore, you will lose face, no? Kaya, meron tayong mga terms such as makapalang mukha, 'di ba? Makapalang mukha, which is the mukha that is yung nasa labas. Makapalang mukha. Therefore, walang consideration sa ibang tao. And in other cultures, I think you will see in the indigenous notions of justice, the idea of bain, or yun nga, it's similar to the idea of hiya, that when you do something, you're supposed to be punished for it, but not by the people, but by spirits, ganyan. But of course, in everyday life, meron din yung parang related din dyan yung concept ng karma, na pag may ginawa kang ganito, ay babalik din yan sa'yo. Okay? So, ang root nitong lahat na ito is that we feel that we should not stand out in the society. Kasi again, we're just doing our function. We should not stand out. Then, we should just follow the norms. And if we do not like the norms, then we should just go with it. Because what comes with not following the norms is a kind of rejection from the society. Ganyan. So, ang mechanism natin to avoid this is yung hiya, na kapag may gagawin ka, there's the threat na you will be put to shame. So ayun, mahihiya ka to stand out. So yun. So that's one idea from the Sakop model that I want to relate to. Ayan, so the Sakop model also emphasizes on harmony than individual rights. Again, it's very much similar to Plato, but again, not that discriminatory. No, because we have these ideas in the Philippine context, pakikisama, pahaging, okay, and yun nga yung hiya. Na, remember, ayan, laging may pressure para makisama sa mga bagong tao. For example, if you're in a new group or you're in a new neighborhood, may idea ng pakikisama na hindi ka magpapatugtog ng malakas dahil alam mo na may mga kapitbahay ka. Ayan, pakikisama. Kumbaga, dahil kung hindi ka makikisama, ano yung magiging epekto nito sa'yo bilang parte ng society? Hindi ka nakakausapin ng mga kapitbahay mo, pagchichismisan ka nila. Which is something that is also very, ayaw natin na pinagchichismisan, ayaw natin na, yun nga, na nagsistand out tayo. Okay? So, kaya naman, hindi tayo very confrontational people. Okay? So, laging, patama, pahaging, ganyan. So, ngayon, napakabago actually ng etong kultura sa social media na talagang nakikipag-away sa mga tao na hindi natin kilala. Maaring dahil nga hindi natin sila kilala, kaya may lakas ng loob na magsalita at makipagdiskusyon. Ito ay very healthy for a democracy. Pero hindi siya healthy kung mga trolls ang kausap, or trolls ang nagsiset ng conversation. 'Di ba? So, pero in general, we are very non-confrontational, right? Like, ayun nga, patama lang, pahaging, ganyan. So, sa Pilipinas, ang pakikibaka ay nagiging last resort. Kasi nga, kung hindi na harmonious ang relationship sa society, then kailangan na nating makibaka. So, ito yung parang idea behind the EDSA revolutions, the people power revolutions, na parang napuno na yung mga tao at kailangan na nilang lumaban sa common enemy, na pinahihirapan ng bansa. Nagiging last resort na siya. So, syempre, hindi ka naman makikibaka siguro kung ang problema ayun nga, maingay na mga kapitbahay. No, pero kaya daw last resort ang kaya last resort ang pakikibaka. Dahil yun nga, hindi tayo very confrontational. Kaya rin naman ito ay napaka-importante. Okay? Kasi hindi naman laging dapat lang ay pahaging or patama lang ang ginagawa natin. Dahil may mga bagay talaga na hindi, categorically ay hindi makatarungan. Okay? Na we need to go beyond for example, the shame of doing things because we need to do so. May mga ganun din namang pagkakataon. Pero yun nga, makikita rin natin to sa pang-araw-araw nating buhay as Filipinos, na talagang even as members of the family, hindi ba? Nagsusunod ka na lang rather than fighting. Okay? Because yun nga, you emphasize on harmony rather than the individual rights. But again, hindi sinasabi nito na ito yung katarungan. Meaning, ito yung tingin natin na makatarungan. Yan. Related din dun sa idea ng social harmony ay yung idea natin ng kapwa. So, sa psikolohiyang Pilipino, may ganitong diskusyon na sa Pilipinas, the idea of self is not different from the idea of self in relation to others. So, pinag-isa yung idea ng sarili at iba, or yung ako at iba sa akin, sa idea ng kapwa. Okay? Ito rin yung sinasabi nila kung bakit maganda yung kataga or yung sentence na mahal kita. Okay? Bakit? Kasi dun sa kita ay naisasama na yung ako at ikaw. Diba? So, kaya daw siya maganda, or it's more touching, kumbaga, kaysa sa I love you, because in I love you, the I is separate from you. Right? So, it's the same with kapwa. Okay? In the idea of kapwa in the Philippines, yung pakikipagkapwa natin, related ito doon sa idea natin ng hiya, anong tawag dyan? Sa idea natin ng hiya, sa idea natin ng pakikisama. Kaya tayo nakikisama kasi itong mga ibang tao ay hindi talaga iba sa atin, lalo na kung kasama natin sila sa bahay, yan, family, kung kasama natin sila sa isang pamayanan, isang barangay, for example, sa isang neighborhood, or even as fellow Filipinos. Okay? Ang pakikipagkapwa ay pagtanggap at pakikipag-ugnay sa ibang tao bilang kapantay. So, alam natin na we are all equal. Again, hindi consistent sa Filipino ethics and Filipino psychology ang sumusunod lamang sa isang tao na makapangyarihan. Okay? Kasi nga ganito tayo lagi, pakikipagkapwa. Okay? Na tutulong tayo dahil hindi lang nito nakakatulong sa iba, kundi nakakatulong din ito sa ating pagiging parte ng isang komunidad or ng isang pamayanan. Okay? Yung utang na loob is also related to this. Na you do something without pay because this person has done something for you in the past that is not equal to an amount of money. Okay, so itong pakikipagkapwa ay isang parte din, isang bahagi din ng ating idea of justice. Okay? So, ayun. So, itong kapwa, itong katarungan, itong kapangyarihan, itong pakikisama, etc., ay pruweba ng relasyon, okay, ng ating wika at ng ating kalinangan or ng ating kultura. Because not just in Filipino psychology or Filipino culture, but culture really is embedded in a language. And language shows you at least shows you the basics, kumbaga, ng idea ng society or ng culture na yon sa kanilang idea of justice, for example. Okay, we will also see other aspects of culture in language. Like for example, ilang salita ba sa Pilipinas ang may kinalaman sa rice? Right? Na mula sa pagkatanim nito, mula sa palay hanggang sa pagiging bigas na process na palay, hanggang sa pagiging kanin, okay, hanggang sa pagiging kanin na malamig na, bahaw, hanggang sa nasunog na kanin, tutong, ay meron tayong salita dahil it's very much part of our culture. So, that's just one example, of course. But itong mga salita na kapwa, yun nga, yung kita sa mahal kita, or katarungan, ay nagpapakita sa atin ng kung paano tayo ini-inform ng ating language about our culture. But again, this is not dictating naman. Okay? Ito, sabi ko nga, ito isimula pa lang ng parang dungaw, pagdungaw, kumbaga, sa sa maraming mga meanings behind our words. So, isa lang yung katarungan, isa lang tong kapwa. But, maaring may makita pa tayong iba na notions of justice in our languages. So, with regards to harmony, harmony is not just a Filipino value. Okay, it's considered to be very, not to be stereotypical, but many Asian countries subscribe to that notion as well, that you don't need, you cannot stand out. Like, for example, in Japan, even in the train, like, even a sliver of noise coming from your earphones is considered very um, is something that is bad, something that offends, very offensive for other people, because yun nga, you need to think of other people in all of your actions. Okay, the Christian worldview, no, in the Philippines, Christian Catholic worldview also views harmony, of course, but of course it also depends on the person who interprets it. Yan. So harmony is consistent with our Filipino values, but also consistent with other cultures as well. So if we will summarize that, these are the things that we consider for a Filipino notion of justice. Okay, that justice can be found in our language in general. There are also values other than justice that are related to it, such as yun nga, katwiran, kapangyarihan, batas, no, that are not necessarily equal to the idea of justice, but are related to it. So we are also informed by a Filipino worldview, and of course the Filipino history. So in a bit we will be tackling a bit of Filipino history, and how this history also relates to our notion of justice. So what we also see here is that our notions of justice can also be based on our values as a society. So this could be one source of justice. So in the final parts of Diokno's work, we can see how he notes or how he defines a just society in terms of a republic, or in terms of a country, in terms of the Philippines. So should be independent and sovereign. It should respect freedom and equal dignity of all. Meron dapat pagkapantay-pantay. Walang may higit na pagkatao. May magandang asal ang mga tao. May dangal at puri ang mga tao. Hindi api at hindi nakikiapi. Marunong magdamdam at marunong lumingap sa bayang tinubuan. So, hindi lamang ito na kay Diokno, pero nandito rin, ito ay makikita rin natin sa mga naisulat na ng ating mga bayani noon. Okay, so, ilang keywords dyan ay dangal. Itong dangal ay dignity, di ba? Ito ay acceptable behavior, rightness, and fairness. That again, kung may dignity ka, kung may dangal at puri ka, itong dangal at puri ay dinedefine ng isang society. So, ano ba yung definition ng society natin kung sino yung may dangal at puri? Di ba very discriminatory din minsan kung sino yung may mga dangal at puri. Lalo na ngayon na makikita na natin kung paano ginajudge ang ibang mga tao base sa hugis ng kanilang katawan, ng kanilang kulay ng kanilang balat, sitwasyon ng kanilang pamilya, kung may anak ka ba nang hindi ka nag-asawa, ganyan. So, actually ngayon, even though we say that the Filipino idea of social harmony is, Filipino idea of justice is social harmony, ngayon, syempre, nagbago na ito. Kasi yun nga dumadami din yung mga expectations natin sa mga sarili natin bilang parte ng society. Okay? No, pero ito, again, it's an ideal notion of a just society. Ito naman, very specific, that a just society protects workers and tenants and opposes oppression, exploitation, and abuse. It seeks to eliminate poverty. And it's united in community, not just brotherhood. It's self-reliant. Yan, pagkakawang gawa, sukat sa katwiran ng bawat kilos, gawa, at pangungusap. Okay, so if we want more concrete actions For a just society, ito yung mga sinasabi ni Jokno na dapat ay mayroon sa ating pamayanan. So kung titingnan natin yung mga sinulat noon about justice. Yan. What a just society entails is the regeneration of institutions, ways of being and thinking, an external and internal revolution. Again, the ideas of justice are changing, so therefore it should also change with the times. Our government should be a moral government born from independence. It governs with truth and without deception. It's progressive, adjusted to the degree of culture and the growing needs of the people. So this was not just Mabini, but also it was also in, for example, if you read Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, Rizal has the pakikibaka, or has the, actually hindi na siya pakikibaka, violence as the last resort, because if you see the dialogues of Simon there, that it seems like the Filipino society is hopeless also, because they have been very complacent with the situation of colonialism. So it could also be applied to the present, wherein what is the incentive for us to fight for our own rights? Okay, what is the incentive for an external and internal revolution? What is the incentive for changing our views or changing ourselves? Okay, so the incentive could be a moral and a just government. And again, makikita natin dito na though nagsimula tayo sa pagtingin sa ating wika, sa pag-define ng kung ano yung katarungan, maaring mag-end naman tayo doon sa yung mga makatarungan sa ating lipunan, yung mga makatarungan na bagay na maaari natin gawin para sa ating lipunan at sa ating sarili, na hindi naman very theoretical. Okay? Ayun, yung for example, yung programs for poverty. Okay? Because social justice is also is justice when you distribute wealth or distribute the goods of the society evenly or equitably. That's also justice. So yon, kahit nagsimula tayo dun sa abstract na idea, ano ba yung tarong, ano yung katarungan, maaaring mag-end tayo dun sa kung ano yung mga dapat gawin natin bilang mga Pilipino sa ating mga sarili at sa ating gobyerno, no? Yun din ay ay kahulugan din ng katarungan para sa atin. So social injustice can be defined in many ways in such a society, na just society. Like, there is injustice if there is no system of law, written or unwritten, or having a flawed system of law. So we can question the legitimacy of the law and its clarity. And if the laws are not changed often, we are living in a socially unjust society. And then if we are not enforcing law fairly, that is also socially unjust. And then, enacting law that does not pursue the social values that constitute the Filipino vision of a just society is also injustice. Okay? This is very tricky because we want laws that pursue our social values, but these social values have also changed through time. And we cannot say that, for example, if this is the view of the majority, then we cannot say that truly reflects our values as Filipinos. For example, imagine a scenario where Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will be winning the presidential elections. Is that a reflection of our values as a people? We cannot say that it is, no, because syempre hindi pa naman tapos, pero so it's very difficult to say that this idea of justice or these laws reflect who we are as Filipinos. Because what about red tagging? What about the EJKs? Is that a reflection of our views as Filipinos? So, ayun. So, according to Jokno, what makes laws, policies, and institutions just? And in general, it respects the individual rights of man, respect the collective rights of people, such as their right to survive, right to external and internal sovereignty, right to development, and the freedom to choose political, social, and cultural systems without outside intervention. So according to Jokno, this is also our rights, that we are not being ruled by other countries, and we aspire for sovereignty, independence, and self-reliance. Now, so of course, we are self-reliant, we are independent, we have sovereignty, but it is much more than that. It's much more than us owning our own government, owning our own resources, but to continuously fight for it. Again, it is not just abstract concepts such as sovereignty and independence, but it is through actual deeds such as eradication of poverty, because poverty and inequality spawns oppression, exploitation, and abuse, policies for a self-directed, self-generated, and self-sufficient economy, restructure relations and structures that cause or perpetuate inequality, and only those necessary to improve um, less privilege in the society. So this is why Jokno's work and Jokno's idea of justice can be related, very much related to John Rawls' idea of fairness. Why? Because again, he notes of people's responsibility and also distributive justice and social justice. Okay? So, yun yung makikita natin na alignment, kumbaga, or relationship of this idea of justice to the mainstream notions of justice that we have discussed so far. So it's more consistent to the idea of roles of a fair society, wherein you do not let inequality, you do not let poverty happen, or you do not let some people trample on other people's rights. Okay, so yung idea of social justice. Okay, so ayun. So we also see these elements of Filipino social justice. The number one, it's also rectificatory or focus on reparation. That justice in our society should be focused on the injustice on the poor and the oppressed. Again, this is one point of roles, diba, na why do we have the original position? Why do we have the veil of ignorance? So that we can take care of our poor and the oppressed through social justice. So, also, it advocates for social change, economic, social, and political institutions. Even if we started with a brief or an abstract sketch of what is katarungan in Filipino, again, we end with actual uh, promise or actual vision of a social change that is beneficial for people in the community. So of course, total equality is unrealistic. Okay? But the goal is to expand people's choices, okay, to live as they want to live in our society. And lastly, free and effective representative government. This is related. Okay? This is related to katarungan. It's not just enough that we are makatarungan on our own. Our government should also be makatarungan, should also be just, because that is the government that governs our lives as Filipinos, socially, politically, and economically. No, so inevitably our lives will be affected by the government. Yeah, so they should also adhere to these notions of justice. So yeah, at this point we can reflect. So do you think that this notion of justice still holds true given recent national events or issues? How can the Filipino notion of justice be seen in the history of the Filipino people? So I have just quoted Mabini and Rizal, but don't you think that the struggles of the Filipino people should at least inform our notions of justice now? That our history of colonialism, of oppression, of domination of other countries should tell us that this freedom that we have now, this independence, this everything in our life today has been the legacies of not just heroes, of course, but of the generations before us who fought so that we could have this freedom. So hindi naman siya kung totoong meron tayong utang na loob, kung totoo na nakikisama tayo, kung totoo na um, gusto nating makipagkapwa, maaaring magsimula tayo doon sa ating sarili, sa pag-aaral ng kasaysayan. Kasi dito din natin makikita yung mga idea ng katarungan ng justice na dapat ay meron tayo sa ngayon. So, masasabi natin na yung ibang parte ng presentation na ito ay hindi na applicable in the present context. But kung hindi na siya applicable, ano yung magiging alternative natin? Okay, so those are things that you can think about. So, thank you very much.